Tēnā koutou katoa. I'm Paul Rowe and I'm the CEO of Vernon Systems. We help organisations catalogue, share and manage their collections. I'd firstly like to acknowledge the local iwi, mana whenua, Ngāti Toa and Taranaki whānui ki te apoku o te ika Māui. This presentation was not spell checked by AI. Artificial intelligence, or AI, is technology where computers and machines can simulate human learning, solve problems, make decisions, and it does that by gathering and analysing massive sets of data. From that, it can make recommendations to end users, it can suggest enhancements to existing workflows, and it can even create entirely new content. Sounds pretty awesome, doesn't it? Often the news about AI has been painting a rosy picture. We've been hearing the stories about self-driving cars probably for more than 20 years. This is a typical news story from back in 2018. If we fast forward to 2025, we can see that now there's a lot more potential pitfalls that are coming to the surface. That's everything from possibly factually incorrect information to harm to our creative communities and maybe even harm in the real world. So we need to be asking hard questions about these systems. Where was the data harvested from that built these data models? Is the data still currently correct? Is it just reinforcing existing stereotypes? Are we using the AI just because we can, or because it's actually delivering benefits to our end users? Just because it's cheaper may not be a good enough reason when compared to the possible negative outcomes. So we can look at how people can be involved in these AI-driven processes to improve the results for our end users, help better assess these possible risks. How can we use our analogue intelligence to make sure that we get the best results? Inflated expectations of technology aren't anything new. Often technology follows what's called the Gartner hype cycle. We start off with a new innovation and we get a whole lot of positive news stories. Some of those expectations may fail to deliver and we might see funding dry up. We fall down into the trough of disillusionment. From there, it's a slow plot up the slope of enlightenment. We have early users that are starting to see genuine benefit from the technology. And eventually, we reach the plateau of productivity, where the technology is reliable and it's in use in the mainstream. But AI is a broad field. Lots of different implementations of AI are at different points in this life cycle. But where they are within the Gartner hype cycle gives us some indications as to the roles that people might play when working in tandem with AI. That could be everything from cross-checking results for something that's a mature piece of technology at that plateau of productivity, or it could be actually using our critical thinking skills to assess whether we're actually willing to go through the risk of something that's at the very early stages in that peak of expectations. So one of the most mature areas, which I would say is at that plateau of productivity, is image recognition. Some of the image recognition techniques are purely mathematical processes, procedural AI, where we're guaranteed to get predictable results. That's still providing useful benefits to the users. So in this example, the AI is detecting colours, and that's giving us a new way of exploring this visual collection. It's still useful for the end users to be able to review the output of the AI. In this case, this particular image has a small area of pink in it. The AI hasn't actually tagged that because it's smaller than the area that it's been programmed to look out for, even though that's something that might have been reasonably obvious to lots of human observers. So we need a way to manually be able to review and possibly tag our own colours. The image recognition can also add other subject tags, and those are again creating new connections between our different objects in the visual collections, creating groupings that didn't exist before. In this particular example, the AI has tagged all of these works as having the pattern circle in them. And again, that's creating connections that we didn't have before. These tags are also providing additional search data. Like the colours, we can actually search on the keywords of those colours as well and find red fire engine, which might not have been present in the description of our items to begin with. As the range of keywords which we automatically add grows, the risk of some of those being incorrect is also growing with it. We can see in this set of images that a lot of the individual works were tagged as stock photography. And that's probably an indication of what kinds of images are in the data model that trained this. In fact, these were unique photographs within an art collection, and I suspect the artists wouldn't have been happy having their works being tagged as stock photography. So you need to have a way of deciding what terms or phrases aren't appropriate within your collection and have a way of blocking those. You will have also seen the option to automatically create transcriptions or captions on platforms like YouTube. Again, that's super useful data. You could have the video on mute and still follow along, but they will have errors sometimes. And that's more the case if the speaker has a non-US accent, or if they're talking in jargon, or if there's non-English words. This particular example is a typical error. This is a New Zealand caver who's describing that he's at the Dorf store. I'm pretty sure there's no Dorf store in New Zealand. He's actually at Dorf's door entrance, which is in Middle-earth Cave in Takaka Hill. So these transcriptions can be dangerously incorrect or even offensive, particularly if there's indigenous language words. So with those transcriptions, you need to at least be checking the results to catch those critical errors. There's also the possibility of creating your own custom data model to better train the AI. You've got more of an idea of what data was fed into it to train on. The Australian Film and Sound Archive did that using their collection records and their existing transcription data. We can then be more confident about the responses that are coming back from the AI because it knows more of the vocabulary that's used within your own collection. You often hear this acronym GPT. GPT stands for generative, in that it's starting with a whole stock of existing content and it's generating or making a production line of stuff that's reworking that content. It's pre-trained. We've taken a whole lot of source material and we've created rules for how that gets used and how you can interrogate it. A bit like a whole lot of ingredients and recipes to go with that. And then lastly, it's a transformer, which is a particular kind of computing architecture that's great for sequential data. If you think about sentences, the exact order of the words in a sentence is critical to understanding the meaning of that sentence. And so transformers are particularly good at dealing with natural language data. So these sentences where the whole sentence has an order and a meaning. So platforms like ChatGPT, if you're on a paid account, let you create these custom GPTs, and you have more control then over what happens with them. You can block ChatGPT from keeping its interactions with that, so it doesn't actually make use of the conversations people are privately having with that data model. And you can also block it from using your data in the custom GPT to train its main system. So Australian Film and Sound Archive were able to kind of ring fence the AI using their custom GPT and then had more confidence over the responses that the AI was generating as a result. We can use those conversations with chatbots also for ideas generation. So that might be as simple as finding some ideas for an activity in a museum. Like in this example, I've just asked it for possible games that teenagers might play in a museum. However, AI has been described as an eager-to-please intern who thinks they know everything, but sometimes lies to you. AI can join things together from the data model that don't actually go together in the real world. So all of these things that are being created, we need to be doing some kind of review if we're willing to share that wide to the public. I can actually ask the AI a nonsense question, and depending on how large the data model is, I might get a nonsense response. Here I've asked what the world record is for crossing the English Channel on foot, and it's actually 14 hours, so it'll be actually quicker to swim. Te Papa recently did a project where they created object descriptions using ChatGPT. So they used one of these custom GPTs, which took their existing public online collection data using their API. They reformatted the fields of information, so they constructed sentences out of that data because that worked better with ChatGPT. And they also found that objects that had multiple images worked better because that was a broader set of information for ChatGPT to try and create a description from that. They found that every single description required manual edits and review, but that process only took minutes compared to a much, much longer period if they had to create a description from scratch. If those descriptions are ultimately used in the permanent collection data for Te Papa, they've already decided that they're going to be flagged as AI generated. And so we're seeing with generative AI and with image analysis some tools where we're on the slope of enlightenment. We're starting to get some actual use cases and some benefits, but some materials easier to work with than others. Mass-produced items, where there might be many similar items already in the particular model that AI uses, are easier to work with. So things like social history collections might be a good starting point. One-of-a-kind records, like images of an artwork, particularly if there's not a lot of text to go with it, are more difficult for the AI to work with. Images where the subject of the image is difficult to detect, or where it's a technical image, are one step further more difficult for the AI. And then lastly, some content is actually sensitive to deal with, so you run a higher risk if you're going to try and auto-generate descriptions, like images of people, for instance. So image generation and video generation, that's an emerging area of generative AI. We can get some amazing results, but they are prone to mistakes. Here I've asked for an image of cave rescue workers, and that's a relatively specific topic. There might be not a lot of similar material already in the data model, but it's given me a reasonable result. However, if I look closely, I can see that the cave rescue workers are faceless, and there seems to be a levitating stretcher, which I've heard is extremely popular in the rescue community. So these images, we need to be checking them thoroughly. We need to be thinking about the limitations of the software before we use it on a wider scale. If you're going to be making a public project using this content, you want to be flagging this as being experimental. Some chatbots aren't even AI. They're just a hard-coded list of questions and answers, like this water service provider option to log a fault. It's just using pre-created content, and it's the safest kind of chatbot to build. We know exactly the workflow that the end user is going to go through. Some chatbots, however, have full rich data models, and they support natural language for having engaging conversations with them. They're much more interesting, but some of the questions are bound to go beyond the scope of what it's able to respond to. So you run a much greater risk of generating content which you may not be comfortable having online. As the State Library of Queensland found with their Gallipoli chatbot AI, they found also it's subject to people deliberately trying to break it. This particular person managed to get the chatbot to talk as if it was Fraser Crane from the TV show Cheers, stuck in the trenches of Gallipoli. The natural language processing of AI is getting used in what's called semantic search. That's where the search engine understands the full sentence that we've typed in as a complete sentence with meaning rather than just individual words that it's looking for. We're also seeing with semantic search it using the summarizing capabilities of the AI to try and automatically give us an initial overview of that topic. However, within the museum world, we need to use our critical thinking to think about whether the content is currently up to date, whether it seems credible, and whether the sources that are quoted are reliable within a museum context. In this particular example, it is said that Ikea's feathers shimmering is based on a discussion on Reddit. So we might have to think about, is that actually okay to cite that within a museum exhibition? There's also biases at all layers within the AI system. The original developers and designers had their own agendas. The data models that we use to create these might only show particular demographics, and they might also reinforce stereotypes that we already have. The final systems, when they're available, might be used to further discriminate particular areas of the society. And then lastly, not everyone will even have access to these systems, so we may just deepen existing digital divides. So you could say that with great power comes great responsibility. We have to think about whether our use of AI is actually helping our audiences connect and understand real objects and stories. And there's also a benefit for real-world experiences. A digital experience is not necessarily a better experience. There's a reason why in-person things like board games are seeing a surge in popularity. People are craving real-world social interaction, so there are still opportunities for non-digital or non-screen experiences. We might conversely say that with great power comes no responsibility. AI is a corporation. AI is another way to make money. That might be in conflict with the altruistic aims of the museum sector. Some of the AI developers may feel no responsibility to the original creators that made all the content that they pulled into their data model. They might feel minimal concern about the impact that their systems might have at a negative level. So we've got this range of tools where we're starting to see some real benefits coming out of it, and we can use them with caution. We can use generative AI to create a draft of a museum article, as long as it's carefully reviewed. We might create illustrative images because that's speeding up our workflow. We might use computer vision to create connections between our visual collections and just make them more discoverable. We might use the natural language processing powers of AI to power semantic search and allow us to engage with chatbots. However, the Global Risk Advisory Council has voted AI as being the #1 risk to organisations' reputations in 2025. They cited possible concerns as including the creation of misleading or harmful information, prejudiced decision-making, and use of AI in unethical applications. We need to make careful assessments about how we're using AI within our industry. One way we can tackle that is by having an organisational AI policy. So you can think about which systems and how you use them in your organisation, and provide your staff with guidelines and expectations for how they make use of those systems. AI is really great at taking these language models and taking this data and just repurposing it in different ways. It can summarise, it can paraphrase, it can take a topic and it can talk about it in a different tone aimed at a new audience. However, there's real concern that AI is not able to generate as diverse a range of ideas as real people can create. The concern is not that AI is compromising human intelligence and human creativity, but that it already has. So we need to be thinking about how we can be involved in these systems, providing safeguards, providing ways to improve the results that come out of these systems to get the best for our audience. We need to be thinking about using our critical thinking skills to assess whether a particular system is appropriate and whether we believe the results that are coming back from it. We need to be thinking about how we can use our creative input to take what AI is producing and go a step further. Let's be 100% clear, all of these skills are at risk of decline. As individuals, we need to be actively using these skills. As organisations, we need to be promoting their use, both through policies and through work culture. The slides are available for this on SlideShare. Ngā mihi.
Got some questions if you want to come up. We've got the mic sorted now. Thank you, Paul. That was very interesting. The first question is, what comes after the plateau of productivity, perhaps the cavern of dismay? That's not a question. Will Vernon or other CMS platforms incorporate AI or semantic search?
So some of those examples were from our products. So we're using image recognition because that's got some of the most predictable results and the least risk. So the colour analysis is software that we've written, and we've incorporated Google Cloud Vision to do subject tagging with all of those review mechanisms built in, so people can block a term across an entire collection, they can block it on a single individual work, they can manually add data to augment what the AI is producing. So those are things we're continuing to experiment with and to add only at a point where we're comfortable that we've put in enough safeguards for the end users.
Excellent, thank you. Any suggestions around ethics and stereotypes or cultural authenticity?
I think that's an area where there's a lot of discussion at the moment, and one of the main areas we're seeing is the development of custom GPTs. So people are actively trying to either augment existing data models by adding on their existing data to try and cover a wider range of demographics, maybe try and move away from some of the stereotypes that might have been in the original data model, or creating completely custom data models where they've got full control over what data's there.
Okay, cool. So you've talked a little bit about some of the challenges that we need to consider when we're using AI, but just personally, is that something that's kind of really excited you and you're like, yeah, let's do this thing, even if, you know, it might not be cool to do it, but
I've seen some amazing work with the transcription layer where people have created custom data models and done bulk transcriptions of enormous volumes of video, and that surfaced those videos in a way that was just impossible before. You just had videos where nobody had the time to watch 1,000 hours of footage to try and find the right clip. And now with automated transcriptions, even if there are some errors, it gives you this amazing search data to drill down and find a very specific clip, which would have been impossible. So there are impressive results that we're getting through these techniques, even though they're not 100% foolproof.
Cool. Can you suggest any skills that we might be able to develop to create custom GPTs?
So within ChatGPT, the tools for creating custom GPTs are designed for non-technical users. It's a very simple process where you can upload a block of data, and there's simple screens for using natural language again to say, well, this is how you're allowed to interrogate the data, how you're allowed to make use of it. So those things are aimed at people that aren't necessarily programmers or experts on the technical sphere.
Fabulous. Thank you so much. So I'm going to invite another round of applause for Paul.